Hey everyone, it's Jexie. Thanks for tuning into another video. Being open about my status of being in recovery is something that's important to me and something I felt comfortable doing from the beginning. However, not everyone feels comfortable doing that, and I think one of the reasons that is because of the stigma that's associated with addiction. So oftentimes when we hear about addicts, we think about those who are still using and not about those who are in recovery. Addiction's a lifelong disease. You never grow out of it or get cured from it. You just kind of learn how to live with it. And so I think that when we hear addicts, we should start being more open-minded about what that means and start to include people who are in recovery and try to get rid of some of that negative connotation. A lot of times when people hear the word addict, they think of somebody who's lost their job, sticking needles in their arm, living under a bridge, or any other things like that. The reality of it is that addiction affects every race. Doesn't matter what income you are or where you live. There's doctors who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year who are dealing with addiction. There are school teachers that are dealing with addiction. It doesn't really matter what you do or where you come from. Addiction affects everybody. And so it's, in my opinion, it's through education and dialogue that we break that stigma. Having people be judged over the fact that they're in recovery is what keeps a lot of people quiet and from talking about it. I was beyond surprised by scrolling through YouTube how few videos there are of people who are talking about their experience in recovery. And for me, it's just so important that people are not as afraid to talk. I regularly talk to people about my experience in recovery, and I'm not quiet about it. Addiction's a disease that takes away a person's free will. It causes people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, and a lot of times it causes a lot of shame and embarrassment. If you've known you hurt somebody because of your addiction, the last thing that you want is to remind a person of that once you're clean. My definition of an addict is somebody who uses drugs when they don't want to use. That's not my definition. That's a definition I believe in. I remember days when I just didn't want to use anymore. I would sit and cry and just beg to like make the feeling of needing to use to go away. I hated putting drugs in my body. Don't get me wrong, at the beginning when I was younger and I used drugs, it was fun. I thought it was a great time. I didn't think I had a problem. I enjoyed it, but I used for a long time once it was no longer fun and I didn't want to anymore. So let's do an experiment. I want you to think of people you know that have a drug addiction. Whether they be family, friends, celebrities, just count them. Just count them up. I bet you can come up with a lot of names. Now I want you to do the same thing, only this time I want you to start counting the number of people that you know that are in recovery. Bet you that's a lot harder. Why? Why is that? Why can we name so many people who have problems with drugs and yet have such a small list of people we know in recovery? Think of the amount of people who you've heard of that have overdosed, whether they're people that you know, celebrities, neighbors, strangers, something you read in the paper. I bet you can give a pretty decently long list of overdoses as well. Why is the list of people in recovery so much lower? Now, if you're a recovering addict, your list of people in recovery is probably much higher. However, for the average person, that's just not the case. And I really think this is something that we need to change. I know how hard it is for people to break the stigma and come out and talk about their experience in recovery, but I think we have a moral obligation to be open about it. Look, it's not going to be for everybody. There are some people who, if they were open about their addiction, would lose their jobs. And I would never want to see that happen to somebody. But I think that there's way more people who would speak about it if they had a platform and a voice. Breaking that stigma is important to me. For my own safety and for my own recovery, I told all my doctors, dentists, that I was in recovery. I told them that I was a drug addict, and this way I would never be prescribed pain medication or any medication for that matter, unless it was medically necessary. So far in the 6 years of recovery, I haven't had to take any pain medication, thank goodness, and I hope to never have to. But I do think it's a good idea to keep doctors up to date on my status. What's disappointing is you do find some doctors, when you open up to them and let them know that you're in recovery, they flag you. They put it down that you can never have any sort of pain medication, or they have to watch about any medications they give you. To me, that's wrong. That's my responsibility as a person. And if I told you that I'm an addict, then I'm not going to try and weasel my way into getting pain medications from you. Don't you think that if I was going to try and lie to get pain meds, that I wouldn't have told you I was a drug addict? I never really understood the logic. And so a lot of times you find that they take complaints less seriously from people in recovery, which to me is ridiculous. If you have somebody in recovery, especially someone who's been in recovery for a few years, who's telling you that they have pain, if anything, in my opinion, you should take that more seriously, because chances are they don't want pain medication. They want a solution to feeling better. They're not looking for a quick fix with medications. By listening to patients, we can learn about how to treat what the problem is. But by automatically writing them off, assuming that they're there for medication, just because they told you they're in recovery, that's a problem with stigma, and we see it a lot. I hate to say it, but emergency rooms seem to be the worst. If you tell an emergency room that you're in recovery and you're there for any type of pain issue, you might as well just leave. Maybe I'm being a little rash, and that's just my opinion, but I've seen it over and over again. I know that there's a problem with people going to doctors and going to emergency rooms specifically looking for pain medication. I know that happens a lot. But if a person's telling you that they're in recovery, why would they do that if they were coming in looking for pain medication? It's hard enough to get medications you need. Why would they set themselves up like that? It's just something that never made sense to me. Another time that stigma's really affected me when I talk to other people is when people think that those who are dealing with active addiction deserve to have bad things happen. Now, maybe you think that's crazy, but I can tell you that I've heard that said by people over and over again. Somebody overdoses, maybe somebody you went to high school with, and you hear about it and it's sad, and a friend tells you like, hey, so-and-so overdosed, and that's awful. And I can't tell you but how many times that I've heard it said, well, that's what you get. That's what happens when you use drugs. Should have made better choices. Not gonna lie, that hurts. Look, I'm not using drugs anymore, but the feelings are still the same. I'm no better than that person that overdosed. I just happened to get help first. I got help before the drugs killed me. That makes me lucky. Not better. Not better than any other person that's used. Why is it that we think that they deserve to die? And maybe that sounds harsh, but I've heard those words said a lot. I mean, think about how you feel when you find out someone overdoses. Do you feel like, well, it's a pity, it's their fault? Or do you feel the same way you feel when you find out someone died of cancer? I bet you don't. So often we blame people for being addicts. We blame them for being sick. Addiction's a disease. We can't blame people for having it. Getting help, that initial step of getting help, is very hard. Now look, in my opinion, once somebody has experienced help, once they have a little bit of clean time, and they go back out and they choose to ignore the help, that's a little bit different, because they know how to get the help they need. They know it's possible. They've had that experience. Some people never get to experience that. It's like a person having any other terminal disease, finding out there's treatment, and then choosing not to get that treatment. Well, we may feel a little bit differently about it if they knew there was treatment available and they chose not to get it, as opposed to somebody who had a terminal disease and didn't know that there was treatment available. They died before they ever got to know that hope. We'd feel awful for them. We'd wish that they had had the opportunity to get the help. We would want them to have been able to get better. So that's, to me, how we should be treating addiction. Think about the statistics. Forget about feelings for a second. Think about statistics. The statistics, especially in the United States, I can't speak for every other place around the world, but I'm pretty sure that they're all struggling. But in the United States, the rate of overdoses are high. The addiction rate is high. Do we really believe that every person who's suffering from addiction deserves to die? Now, of course, that sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but when we treat people who are dealing with addiction as less than, as something awful, as not deserving the hope or the help. Then isn't that what we're saying? Aren't we saying their lives aren't valued? I've had friends say to me when finding out about somebody else who's overdosed, well, guess they shouldn't have used drugs then. Guess they shouldn't have made those choices. That's their problem, not mine. Although they're not speaking to me, it's hard not to take that personally. It's hard not to feel feelings. How would you feel if that was me? Would you say that too bad? I deserved it? I guarantee you that somebody in your life is dealing with addiction. The numbers are too high to know nobody. Wouldn't you want them to get better? Having that kind of stigma shown to us by family and friends is probably the hardest. You know, when we see it with doctors and pharmacies and dentists and any of those other places, it hurts. But it's crushing when it comes from family and friends. Being supportive of somebody who's going through addiction is difficult. And I do not mean enabling. I do not mean that you should give up your money and your time to somebody who is unwilling to get help. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we should start to look at addicts as people who are sick, not people who are bad. Sick people deserve help. Bad people deserve nothing. When we start to look at addicts as sick people needing help, perhaps we can do something to change the statistics and save lives. That stigma is the reason a lot of people don't get help. What if somebody's using and they're not telling anybody that they're dealing with addiction? They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their friends and family. They don't want to be seen as less than. So they don't ask for help. We have to stop making people too afraid to ask for help. When we view people as sick and not bad, we open up the doors for people to get the help they need. Look, it's not any one fix, and I wish I had the solution. I don't. I can just tell you that when I feel like I have the love and support of family and friends, when I feel like they're more understanding about the work that it takes to stay clean each and every day, when I don't feel judged, recovery is easier. Staying clean is easier, and offering the message of hope becomes easier. So look, if you take anything from this video that may be a little rambly, I want you guys to think about how you view those people in your life that are addicts. Maybe by viewing them as being sick, or being supportive when someone tells you that they have a drug problem, or maybe offering to help somebody find the help they need. We can go a long way into saving lives. Lives of our friends, families, loved ones. Together we can change this. We can make a difference. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to sharing another video with you soon.